AI is also making like content production like free, and producing content gonna become a commodity, and live is the only area where it's not true. This live content is becoming more and more valuable.
Today on Beyond the Rays, I'm joined by Vic Tixier, the co-founder and CEO of ScorePlay. ScorePlay is an AI-powered media infrastructure built for sports organizations. It automates the centralization, tagging, and distribution of photos, videos, and other live broadcast content.
Where this industry is going, the importance of live content for civilization, really. That's the last, proof of life that we're gonna have is, seeing those athletes and those artists performing, playing a role in this. That's the mission.
So Vic, for people who haven't heard of ScorePlay yet, how do you describe it to them? What are you up to in building?
So ScorePlay is a software company, right? And it's actually relatively simple to explain. We are working in the sports industry, but typically anything live. Sports is our biggest vertical. And we help that industry better manage all the content that is getting created around the live events. So we centralize all the photos, videos, broadcast angles into like one single platform. And then we have AI tagging all of that and then distributing it to the right people. And so the problem that we're solving is super simple, is you have a ton of content getting produced around those events. And so we leverage AI to index all of that and make sure that everyone that needs access to it, whether it's an athlete, a talent, a sponsor, a broadcaster, get access to it.
That sounds amazing, especially in today's age where there are so many video clips and content for sports and other verticals to manage. So to make that tangible, let's take it courtside. I know you've been traveling all over the world and working with some of your clients in Europe, on the East Coast and on the West Coast. If we were to drop into a typical game day, how does ScorePlay help your clients manage that content more efficiently? Is there an example of something that used to not be possible that ScorePlay now enables?
During 3 weeks, I think they are organizing around 1,000 tennis games because you have men, women, doubles, etc. For every game, they have at the very least 5 camera on the central course, 40 cameras, I think. And so the idea is to say we ingest all of that. We ingest the content captured by up to 20 photographers, everything that is captured by people doing social media, vertical clips. And so the way it's working today, or it's what's working, is everyone is producing content for one specific use case. So whether it's publish things on Instagram, or whether it's for the linear television program, or whether it's for a documentary for one of the players. Our bet is to say, if you centralize all of that and you make it accessible to everyone involved, on a Grand Slam like tennis, like the Australian Open, it's 30 broadcasters, 50 partners, obviously 500 players. So if all of them have access to the different type of content, depending obviously on the rights to this content, they're gonna produce and reuse and repurpose the content much more. And so you end up in a situation where you have to produce less because what you're already producing is used much more, and you can monetize and make sure that you can repurpose and have a better ROI on the content that you have. So I would say a good example of that is, and it was at Tennis Australia, it was a bit for the Australian Open, it was an interesting one. There was this footage in the locker room. They started to put camera in the locker room where Coco Gauff destroy her racket after a game. And because of the platform, someone in social media was able to clip that particular moment. And it created a lot of noise around it. Was it a good thing to record that? That's a good thing. But at least in terms of storytelling, it was amazing because you were able to use something that would have never been able to use, that was just made for broadcast on social, and created stories and debates. That was super. So that's an example.
That's awesome, and I'm definitely going to be looking for that footage on Instagram after this conversation. That's awesome. So I'm hearing so much less manual steps, so much more interconnectivity around teams. That's just so awesome. How did you start going to market within ScorePlay? Was it were you always this interconnected across the different media sources at games, or did you have another wedge into your market?
So we've been very problem oriented. So the first problem we solved was a photo issue. So again, now we do everything. At the very beginning, we're very much focused on answering the problem, this exact problem, just for photos. So yeah, like photographers producing 1,000 image for per events, and then we help them like reducing to like the 300 best, and then we had like AI helping them like tagging the athletes, the sponsors logos, and then we had AI sending those to the different stakeholders. And so the reason why we won those first deal was because we're saving them between 10 and 20 hours of time at every game that they were shooting. And so it was like, the pitch was you can use that time to shoot more, to do extra work on either for another client or for another event. And then, we sold to them first, build the product, and then we went to the teams and we're like, okay, we could do that not just only for photos, but also for videos. And like little by little, it became like this kind of media infrastructure that those teams were using. So very problem centric, like problem solution and ROI centric.
You know, I love a good wedge play. We've talked a lot about that in the course where we originally met. And so it
Yeah.
sounds like, you picked an entry point into the market that was more accessible. Doing photos is probably a significantly lower lift than video. You perfected that. You went to teams and then ultimately started building the incredible infrastructure that led to our Coco Gruff
Yeah.
moment
Exactly, because if you do
today.
team, you can do
Mhm.
leagues. Leagues have broadcasters problems, and then the leagues are working with broadcasters and with brands. So you can, so it's a huge network effect because when you're in a niche and a verticalized business, you can really go like use the network effect to go from one customer to another.
Absolutely. As you think about you've written a lot actually online about how ScorePlay is a media infrastructure company in sports. And we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about how you got to where you are today. Can you give us any maybe sneak peeks into what your North Star from here looks like? Are there new features that you're developing that you can share with us, or any other sort of goals or articulation of that new North Star?
It accelerated everything for us because we were lucky to always having the vision of building like kind of an infrastructure, since day one. And now, like, for a long time, people are like, we don't want to all in one. We don't want to, have a single source of truth because we can find on the marketplace like people that will do the best feature possible for this exact use case. So I don't know, a clipping tool, a distribution tool for athletes or whatever. And now, funnily enough, people realizing that you're gonna need to have like much less software. And what matters the most is how can you have like super centralized and clean data, and then AI models will be able to analyze and treat to create business outcome. And so this is our North Star: is how can we become this central repository of content for not only like one particular client, so one particular team, but an entire ecosystem. So teams, leagues, athletes, broadcasters, brands, etc., and interconnect all of them so that when you are, joining the network, not only you can, manage your content and you pay for that content that you manage, but you can also access all the content shared by other, stakeholders in the ecosystem. And so that's the North Star: is how do you become this industry standard media infrastructure that helps you leverage as much as possible like all the AI capabilities available, and that will continue to become available. And also, how do you interconnect with all the other stakeholders?
I love to hear that. I think, one of the biggest opportunities for AI that comes up in every industry or niche that I talk to is how it can compound on data sets that are proprietary to you. And I remember I was at Super Returns last year, and there was an early stage investor on stage talking about how his favorite AI company is actually it's called Halter. It goes on cows and it tracks their feeding and sort of like roaming habits and health habits. And what's amazing about this is by collecting all this data about cows roaming around in their fields, imagine what AI can do on top of it to make sure, that the right cows are getting the right health treatment. It was incredible. It was the first, now Halter has recently raised another round, and I think they're a much more common example. But at the time, even a year ago, it felt really like outer space. It was just a really interesting, cool
I do think that
application.
hardware companies like gonna be much more interesting in the next few years than they used to be.
Absolutely. So, maybe it's not cows. Sports are probably a little bit more in my wheelhouse than cows roaming in their field, but it's a great example or analogous inspiration as we talk about in business model design to see how owning ecosystems of data can really amplify AI capabilities and just really create that deep moat as we continue to, see more and more emerging tech develop. So, love to see
Yeah.
that.
And another element on that that is interesting is when you take a step back, the reason why we decided to focus so much our time and energy on live and not like any type of content was because AI is also making like content production like you know totally free and producing content gonna become a commodity. And live is the only area where it's not true. And on the opposite, because it's more and more complex to find like content that is not AI generated, this live content is becoming more and more valuable. And there is like this uh, moment where a lot of people have this aha moment where they're like, oh, so live in a world that is totally artificial will become more and more valuable. So they invest in IP owner that are creating those live moments. Um, so valuation are increasing for like those teams, those leagues, etc. But they need to build like scalable business models because at the moment, like it's not scalable at all. So they need tech, and so there is this also this perfect like you know obviously 5 years ago we never had anticipated any of that, but we are like positioned at the perfect moment with the product that answer like this huge industry problem where they are all like we have a huge opportunity but we don't know how to capitalize on it.
One of the things I talk about a lot is how, in a world of AI, the thing that will be our biggest competitive differentiator for businesses is perspective, and our relationships are part of that. And so, when we think about an AI driven world, your communities, the way that you live, play, and work with others, like those are going to be the moments that are super valuable. And of course, sports teams fall into that. To your point, there have been so many more acquisitions of sports teams at those higher and higher valuations. And of course, the tech needs to scale. I love having these kinds of conversations because you start to see the new proof points of some of those patterns emerging in our world.
The way we thought about it with the team was, and I think any company like should think like that, is one, how AI is transforming like my industry and how should I position myself like to be on the winner side and not like on the people that will like get commoditized. And on the other side is like how should we change like internally all our processes to build like a company that is AI native. And that's where us as startups are also super lucky because we are used to operate very lean. We are used to like change and pivot all the time like internally. So it's it's probably easier for us, but still, like, it's already super overwhelming. And it's doing this back and forth between, okay, how should I position myself as a company, and how should we operate as a team to deliver and execute on this mission.
I think that's great advice. So, the things that I wrote down here just to crystallize that is for startups today, key things to consider are how can you start to develop a data moat in your industry so that if you are, secondly, AI native, you have a deeper moat as you go to market. And then, thirdly, how do you think about how the market around you is evolving, especially in terms of human connection? Have there been any new ways that you've evolved how you operate in context of AI or other trends in your industry?
Yeah. So I mean, you use the the term modes, and I think it's obviously probably even more important than it used to be, like, to really think about them, like, very deeply, and like over invest in this, because that's the most difficult, is in a world where you can go into so many directions. It's like, how do you keep your focus, and like, how do you know where to invest your time, energy, capital, to accelerate, and double down on those modes. And so, in our case, as you said, like, data is super important, because you are trading like proprietary data, not on the content itself, but on the usage of the content. That is invaluable. Second, like, yeah, the relationship, you can the network effect that you're creating. So if you're joining, like, starting using the platform, obviously you get access to a software, but the software is becoming more and more a commodity. So it's like, what network do you unlock? So that's why we're organizing much more, like, in-person events. We did one in London last week, for instance, with clients, partners, investors, and, like, just creating like this community. And in the products, as I was telling you, like, also making sure that you get access to, like, you come for the product and you stay for the community that it's unlocking. A third one that is very specific to us, is we believe that our cap table is one of our moats, because if you want to build, like, the industry standard media infrastructure of like, it's so much powerful to have the industry on your cap table. So that's something that we've done a lot, in particular athletes. Some, like, athletes, leagues, people that have a direct interest of you winning, and of owning a part of your company. I think Bitcoin is a perfect example of that. That's why, like, people, are spending so much time, like, speaking about it. And the last one for us that is very important is the human capital. It's like, you're buying from people and you're getting delivered the service from people, and so that those people are becoming even more important than they used to be, in a world, again, where software is commoditizing. So it's the knowledge of, like, helping you take the right decisions, and like, this expertise that is becoming more and more important.
I attended one of your events here in the Bay Area. I believe it was last year for the NBA All Stars. And I
Yeah.
had the pleasure of meeting some of your teammates. And I was so impressed with everyone that I met, but both from how smart they were on the function that they covered, and just they were fun and nice to be around. And I think that that is also candidly a competitive advantage when you're thinking about serving customers today.
100%. And again, like, becoming more and more important. And we see that, like, I think a lot of our customers are really, when we're doing, and I have data to back that, but when we're doing, like, NPS, like, Net Promoter Score, like, the first element that they are mentioning is the service, and, like, customer success, like the sales process, and that's something that you need to iterate more and more. And where, again, like, AI can enable you to deliver, like, an even better service.
Yeah, but it's important to amplify those human connections versus
Yeah.
remove them altogether. That's what I hear you say. I think that's awesome. And then what's really powerful about how you talk about your cap table is that you're aligning incentives for strategic partners across the ecosystem. And we talk about strategic investors from time to time, but the way that you positioned it, of remember having the folks on your cap table that also want you to win and are the people that you're hoping to collaborate with, I think is really significant to continue to build that community through the in-person events that you're having. So absolutely, I think those four kind of elements that you shared are really powerful. So would love to kind of go back to when we first met. So you and I first met in my Dreams to Dollars Unlocking Your Business Model course, which I originally designed for 776 and have taught it to countless accelerators and funds since. And in that class, we talked very specifically about something called business model design. So we went over the different levers of the business model, the philosophy of how you can dig in and really grow your business over the phases from where you are today to your North Star, which is why I had those North Star questions for you earlier. If you look back from when we first met to where you are now, how has that course perhaps helped you, or some of the conversations that we've had in the course, how has it helped you think about and evolve ScorePlay's model over time?
I have a business background, so I've studied in a business school, so I've done my I can say like all those elements, but in a very theoretical way. And what's funny is when you launch a company, you're spending a lot of time like you know finding your product market fit, and as I was telling you, like starting with the problem and like finding solutions, etc. Which is great. And that was the first. So it's my second company. Like the first company was we did exactly the same, but we had like two big issues. One, we were operating like on a very very small market. We're doing the 10-second thing is we're doing a video recording system for amateur sports facilities, which on paper is amazing because we all play tennis or basketball, and we all wanted to see ourselves. But everyone knows the problem, and you have like millions of people that are trying to solve it, and you don't really have a market. And so we were lucky to sell this company and it was a bootstrap company, so we didn't make the mistake of raising fund and stuff, which was which would have again like created alignment in the incentive. And so when we launched the second company, we were like, okay, let's make sure we have we know that we're building like a real business. So one, again, like let's keep what we know how to do well, which is solving a real problem with a tech solution. But now let's make sure that we apply that to a big market, and that we're building an organization that are respecting the fundamental of like a good enterprise business. And I think we always had that in mind, but your class kind of like helped also adapting those theoretical rule to the reality of like a small company that is trying to understand exactly what are the boundaries of what you should do and what you shouldn't do, in order to obviously like fake it until you make it when necessary, but at the same time like making sure that you're being very honest with yourself, and you're looking at the numbers and the metrics in the right way. And I think this is what was the most interesting for us was like being able like to look at our profit margin and like understanding what should we put in it, and what the decision that you're making like now that will have an impact in 2 years, etc., etc. So that's just an example, but like those little elements like making those numbers speak. And it doesn't mean that you need to run your company as like a 500 company, but like just making sure that you are aware of what will be waiting from you, in order to build a very sustainable business. And I think like too many startups are just like overseeing that.
That feels a little spicy. Let's lean in there. So tell me a little bit more on your take of how maybe founders are overlooking the numbers today.
I think historically, I do think there is too much capital in VC in general, like that is that needs to be invested, and so investors are like just as they should. Like again, there is a huge misalignment in investors that in order to return like big funds need like you know exponential return that will come from like a few companies in their portfolio. And some companies that have the dream, like to and sell are selling a dream, that's it's just not that they are not able to deliver, and that creates like a huge misalignment because they are getting asked to deliver the business plan that they sold, which is fair. And at, and it almost feels like both the company and the investors at the time of the investment didn't actually look into the possibility of delivering this plan. And so what, as a business, we always try to do is be like as transparent as possible, like on what we think we can deliver and deliver it. Even if it's not the and every time we people are trying to push us, we're just telling that maybe it's not for them, or it's not the type of company they want to invest in. And at the end of the day, I think this is what's made our company very interesting in today's world, is like we're delivering on our plan. And at the end of the day, the more and public companies, typically that's what they are getting asked to do. But if you train the muscle to do that as early as possible, you're also making sure that you're creating something that is more scalable. So I've always seen that as let's never overpromise, and always build something that is scalable.
That is such important guidance to give founders today. I couldn't agree with you more that there's more capital than ever in venture. And I don't necessarily believe that just raising more money will help you execute on a bigger vision, right? There's a lot more method to that madness of execution. So it's just great to hear how well you and ScorePlay and the team have balanced that against investor expectations. What other advice would you give, in context of this theme that we're talking about now? If a founder's listening in on our conversation, is thinking about going out for a fundraise, what advice would you give them about how to more prudently find the right capital for their vision?
I mean, I would say two things. Like, the first one is build relationships as soon as possible, because the best investors are the ones that it's I mean, it's super cliche, but it's a wedding. Like, if you're gonna end up spending a lot of time with them, and you need to know, one, if they're gonna be helpful, and two, how they're gonna react when things will get spicy, because they always get spicy. That's why we're doing that. I mean, it's a risky asset. uh, and that's another thing. Like, investors that don't real I mean, that's are not helping when things are tough, or at the very least are not letting you building, are trying to so that's one of the elements, like making sure that who you're gonna work with. And then, obviously, I know that a lot of founders that will listen to that won't have the choice, and that's the second thing, is if you end up having to raise with people that you don't respect or you don't want to work with and stuff, maybe you should, again, challenge your business plan. And maybe it's because you're trying to do something that you shouldn't do. It's like rethink your expectation, rethink your plan, and be realistic. I think being realistic in a raise is the most important thing. Even that's again, that's how we think about it, at least.
For those of you who are not watching the video, I just did a little standing ovation clap for Vic. I think this is spot on. Relationships are at the core of everything that we do today. So, in whatever business that you're running or managing or operating, the relationships between you and your board, you and your investors, you and your team, you and your clients are the most important thing. And a lot of times when people are bringing on new investors, they forget that it's a wedding and that you're going to be working with those individuals for, potentially longer than other teammates or board members or leaders at your company. It's the most important relationship. You'll definitely be working with them, longer than likely even your longest customer if they come on pre-revenue, right? And so it's really important to think about that. And I love this concept, Vic, of being realistic in a raise. I think it's important to have a big vision of where you're going. That's why we always do talk about a North Star, but to really anchor in, you're investing in this for this period of time. And here's what we aim to deliver on and how that's going to unlock the future. And so many founders I find, if they're struggling with a fundraise, they'll make the vision even bigger, or they'll, and that's never the solution, right?
It's so funny that you say that because to your point, like being realistic doesn't mean that you shouldn't be ambitious. Because if you're not ambitious, like and it's fine. Like that's also what I'm saying to people. Like sometimes you shouldn't raise, or the first business was great because it was bootstrapped. Okay, it was a small market, but at the end of the day, like it was a very good outcome on a small market. But to the second point is the and that was some of the toughest time for me as a CEO that is in charge of like the of funding the company, was the seed round, like our initial no our pre-seed round in Europe, where investors were like, you're operating on way too small markets, it's not venture friendly and stuff, and funnily enough they were right in two sense. Right, because we had to build a global business. We had to be in the US and stuff, and I was in Portugal at the time, like starting from Lisbon. And I had zero like experience in sports and media in the US, so I understand why they had like a dot on that. So they were right at the time, because we hadn't proved like certain elements that would have reassured them. And so what I did that was a mistake, was changing the vision and like starting selling, like and at the time it was the NFT craze and stuff. So I started selling like an NFT dream or whatever. And honestly, I've got so lucky that and we ended up having like term sheets for this vision until
Wow.
we realized, okay, we don't believe in what we sold. So we ended up not doing it, and that's honestly would have killed ScorePlay, because then like again, misalignments on the project and the incentives, and like boom, I think it would have exploded. Yeah, I 100% agree on that. Like you can be very very ambitious without like selling like a dream that you don't believe in.
I again just so deeply resonates. I joke so often with founders and entrepreneurs, and honestly even leaders of some of our corporate clients. Sell before you build, but make sure what you sell you can create, and that it's actually feasible and within your core competitive advantage. And if NFTs are not, then definitely don't start
Exactly.
selling those. So I am so happy that you did not build the NFT business so that we could have the opportunity to meet on ScorePlay, and I get to see Coco Graf's locker room moment after this recording. I'm very excited. No, I love that. And I think, again, to say something else that you said that really resonated with me was, just because you're realistic doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious. I am a delusional optimist that any idea is feasible with the right business model. It might mean that, to use Elon Musk's grand vision of humans on Mars, it might not mean that, we're going to raise some money today and be on Mars in 12 months, but perhaps through different business models and offerings laddered on top of each other over time, maybe at some point in the future that could be feasible, right? And so build for that big vision, but like root yourself in reality of what you can actually do today and like what needs to be done to get there.
And to this point, I think the reason why is credible when he's saying that he will go on Mars is because of all the track record, and everything that he's building in order to get there. Because like I don't know, SpaceX, impossible to do reusable rockets, etc., etc. That makes then this like North Star, as you call it, like actually potentially realistic, but he's probably the only one on earth that can like sell this vision. And I think for us it's the same. It's like, as I was telling you, like it was not a venture friendly business when it was built by two 25-year-old guys in Lisbon, that never sold in the US, but it became like more and more like possible as we proved and we executed on like on this vision to work like with more and more like first American clients, teams, then leagues, and now like I'm able to tell you we're gonna become this industry like standard media infrastructure that everyone in live will use, so that everyone that needs access to live content will use CorePlay at some point. Like this becomes possible. That was not possible 5 years ago, and probably in the way to frame it, it was really important to show the milestones, and that's why we ended up raising like 3 safe rounds for this pre-seed, only with business angels. That's where we discovered the power of the business angel that were actually much more valuable for us than a classic VC. It was a 1.5 million round total, across like 20 investors. And it was so much more powerful to have like those 20 investors that was helping me on like specific elements. Some were entrepreneurs, some were athletes that were opening doors. Some were investors, but like investing privately that we could connect, would then connect me with the VCs for the seed round. And at the end of the day, like they were able to make this investment privately because a 10x on a 10 million valuation was great for them, and I could deliver that. I had like a credible plan to get this business to 10 million ARR, until I had like the clearer plan on how we would get to 1 million, like 100 million ARR at some point. And now like the goal is to do much more than that. So yeah.
I think thank you so much for sharing that. I think the key takeaways here are twofold. One, you don't have to just be thinking about how to get humans on Mars. You can think about a much more near term milestone and how you ladder into it and start showing traction as you go to build proof points for your team, for yourself, and for your current and future investors, right? To be able to open up those paths to capital. And then I love this idea of how your early investors were sort of your early team. There was so much more value that they offered, beyond just capital. And it is so hard to build and recruit a team when you don't have any money at the beginning. And so I think that's such a strategic play on your part.
Yeah, and on the and I mean, two things on that. On the go to more thing is, at the end of the day, when you're fundraising, you're storytelling, like, and anything in life, you're storytelling,
Yeah.
and that's why you guys in America are much better than than Europeans for that.
It, I've I've
um
I've heard that same point, by the way. I recently interviewed someone in Singapore and he said the same thing. He just said, "You guys in America are so good at storytelling. Like your pitch decks are
yeah,
out of this world."
yeah, I mean, it's a superpower, like for sales, fundraising, etc.
Mhm.
And I've been learning so much, like just being here, and so you can tell your story different ways. Like again, like um if you're retro engineer the story, I'm sure, like he didn't think about doing SpaceX. I mean, first doing Tesla to have the factories to do like SpaceX, and then like now like doing ships and stuff. So, but if you tell the story in the right order, it seems like super logical. And I think this is also what you need to do as a founder. Is like creating those little signals and then ordering them in the right order, so that the story that you're selling seems like obvious. And that's actually pretty tough, because you're so heads down that you need to be able to take a step back and like think, okay, what the big picture here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I haven't heard it explained that way, but I'm just reflecting on our conversation of how problem focused you and your team have been. And so maybe the guidance is even thinking about the problems that that you can solve early, with an MVP of the tech, solving a couple of those, proving that you can get some traction. And then before you do a fundraise, take a step back and say, like, what is the best way to thread the needle across all of these
Yeah,
to make me look like a genius?
yeah, I mean,
Right?
the this yeah, it's this analogy with an helicopter. Like you have to be able, like to to do back and forth between like being super like in our case, for instance, it's spending time with photographers, with videographers, social media manager, like understanding, like and on the ground, like how things are actually working, and then like go into discussion with those private equity funds, about like what's the future of the sports industry. And the link between both can be pretty tough to find. But when you start like understanding the big uh, how the fact that you're in a like in our case we're in media business, so the product that those teams, leagues, broadcasters are delivering to customers is a media product. So you need to understand like the product, and then obviously you can understand like strategically, like, but it's this back and forth between the two that have like a huge benefit.
I really enjoy that you called this out. I actually think in the United States, we're not as good about getting user insights before we build as a blanket statement, sort of across
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. I find that in markets like Asia or in Europe, where it is a little bit more common to bootstrap a business, you are by design forced to spend more time with your customers to make sure that when you use your precious resources, money, time, etc., you're building something that people actually want. And so I think that's a huge lesson learned for any founder or entrepreneur or even corporate innovator listening in, of like, you have to stay close to your customers and you have to know what their pain
Yeah,
points are.
and you should enjoy it. That's another
Yes.
thing. That's It's not easy, because the only reason why I did it at the time was not because I was thinking, okay, this is the playbook, I should do that. It's because I was generally super passionate about like spending time with those people and like solving their pain points. So when you're passionate about that, it's much easier.
No, absolutely. I think doing something, and that's why they say that you should build a business that you're excited about, because you're inherently going to spend a lot more time with your customers and with your team. And it sounds so obvious, but to your back, calling back the NFT point, if you're not really excited about what you're building, you probably shouldn't be building
So
it.
that was the realization. Is like we we were having a beer in Lisbon with Zab, and we're like, man, we never we never bought any NFT in our life. Like, why would we do that?
Well,
So yeah.
you know something that's really funny? I have to confess, I've actually never listened to a podcast before, and here I am having this conversation with you. So
Yeah, but that's it's funny because that's the like same. Like, I've never didn't photography in my life. I don't have
that's true.
Instagram,
That's true.
so I'm not a big social media person. But but we've always been fascinated with that on like how you're building those workflows to
Mhm.
help like people do their job faster, like blah blah blah. And on paper it's like it's super boring for 99% of the people, but and doing that in an industry that we love made it like
Mhm.
so much easier, because you end up like solving like doing plumbing, but in like in watching like some of my favorite athletes. So that's pretty fun. And then there is the business aspect that is obviously the most important, like understanding where this
Mhm.
industry is going, the importance of live content for a
Mhm.
civilization, really, because that's the last proof of life that we're gonna have is like when we're gonna open those screens, is like seeing those athletes and those artists like performing will be the last thing. So playing a role in this, that's the reason, and that's the mission. I feel it's so much easier when you have like a mission you're happy, you're proud about, and that's also something important.
You've also been exceptional at fundraising. You've been able to raise, $20 million to date, I believe,
Yeah.
which, given your traction, is really impressive of how efficient you've been with that. Again, your team is growing. You have all these new markets all over the world layered on. How have you learned about managing growth through that much change? And candidly, not that long of a time. It's been a couple of years since you've really seen so much explosive growth.
I think to your point, earlier about the classes that we had together, etc. It's like just staying very data driven, and making sure that you are super grounded in all the like the decision that you're taking. So from top to bottom. So in all our company updates, like monthly company updates, whole hand, etc., we start with like financial numbers, so that everyone knows where we are, and how we are performing against like our targets, and where we want to go, because that way people feel accountable. And this accountability is key. Like, we have four main values in the company. Like, the first one is around ownership and accountability. The second one is actually, again, like around like our ability to be vulnerable. So when we're not performing, and like, being able like to ask for help, like challenge things. The third one is like uplifting, always try to improve. So if we hit our target, we're like, okay, how can we do more actually than that? Or maybe the target was not high enough. And so, those are like those things that are super important. It's like, when things are going well, like, don't go over your head, like, just try to do more, but staying like very focused. And when things are not going well, like, don't put things on the carpet, like solve problems. And like, that has been like, what we've done that's worked pretty well, I think.
The vulnerability piece really resonates me. I think so often when things aren't going well, whether you're missing a number or
Yeah,
maybe you get feedback from a customer that doesn't match what you thought you would get,
you
it's
find
so
excuses.
yeah, it's so easy just to bury it and never come back to it. And I think being able to pull that up is a big indicator of success. Like, you have to get comfortable with the fact that we'll all keep failing, keep learning along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's, and not being defensible. Like, just saying it's just an opportunity for growth. And it's easy to say, very tough to implement.
Mhm. Well, I think it's tough to implement because I think that we have, as a society, have a tendency to internalize perceived failure and turn it into shame without even realizing that we're doing that cycle. And so there's so many mental barriers to being able to have conversations about, like, hey, this thing didn't work how I expected it to. Here's what I'm thinking about doing next time. What do you think, Vic? Like, that conversation's actually really hard for people to have. And so rooting that as one of your main values at ScorePlay, I would imagine, probably makes a really big difference for your team, and learning that language and getting used to those cycles, and just realizing that's a normal part of being an innovator and an entrepreneur in a startup or an entrepreneurial organization holistically, right?
Yeah, even though I do think it's not for everyone. I see, organizations that are thriving, again, like, being the opposite of that. We spoke about Elon Musk. Like, I'm not sure he's the most vulnerable guy ever. But you also need to find like your operating principles that are working for your organization in like a particular market. And we are in a market like where you can't fail. Like, live, it's so we need to be able like to be very, very comfortable with what we're doing before going to market with the products. So yeah.
It sounds like strategy, values, the way that you go to market, all of these things continue to evolve. I think often people think, oh, we do it once and then it's just like that forever. But the reality is the world is changing faster than ever. The way that we're working is changing faster than ever. That means our strategy is changing faster than ever, and our values need to go with it. So I think that's just a great, just to underscore that point of, whether it's your values or your strategy or how you're serving your customers, continue to iterate on it and make sure that maybe you check in every 6 or 12 months to see if it's still best serving you and your organization. Okay, final question for you, Vic. So there's likely, a number of founders listening to our conversation who maybe have just raised their first real round, and now they're realizing how much work is ahead of them. The work is really starting after that capital hits your bank account, right? What advice would you give someone who is in that position?
The biggest problem to me is that you need, again, like, to sell the vision and to spend a lot of time on the long term. Like, what's the long term plan is. And so after that, now you have like, your capital to execute the plan that you sold. But the most important is like, how are you gonna get to the next milestones? And it's this ability to, again, like, get back from, like, in the helicopter analogy, like, back to earth as quickly as possible. And like, make sure that the rubber meet the road, and like, you can really, really like start focusing as much as possible. Forget about speaking to other investors and stuff, because you're like still very much into this mindset. And so the shift and the ability to shift as quickly as possible, like, to execution mode, is so important. So like, making sure that you're saying no to any investor that wants to have conversations, like all of that, so that you can get back into execution, and like not trying to do everything at the same time too. Like make sure that you have like a super clear plan, and I think this is the biggest like mindset shift that you need to do, is like going from like super high level like selling mode to super operational like execution mode. Your ability to reduce the friction and the transition phase will be like will save you like, I don't know how long, but like a lot of time.
For sure, it'll save you a lot of time, runway, all different kinds. The longer it takes you to shift, the more resources you're spending along the way. And I think that's a muscle too that I'd imagine founders can, and entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs of all kinds can learn in their day to day too, right? There's all different kinds of meetings that you would probably be having, maybe with other leaders on your team, or more technical staff that are or teammates who are maybe actually building the infrastructure or the app. And so even maybe reflecting kind of as you're going through execution mode of, hey, maybe I'm not coming all the way into the helicopter like I would for a fundraise, but how am I maybe practicing liftoff and then touching back down again? And am I getting better at those little lifts such that the next time I'm flying over New York City in my helicopter, I know I can get back down, a little bit faster in the future. So I think that that's just a great shout. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Vic. It was so great to spend time with you. I am so grateful for the conversation and for all these golden nuggets of insights. It's just such a pleasure to see how successful you and ScorePlay have been, and looking forward to cheering you into the future.